My name is Jody, and I just retired from my super important yet super boring corporate job where I explain complex things to the C-suite executives in 5 minutes or less to get them to actually make decisions and do something. I will now take these corporate superpowers and do deep dives into current events and help to answer the obvious questions. And this is my podcast. Yesterday I was privileged to watch the demise of a career. Kimberly Cheadle is soon to be leaving her job to spend more time with her family. That's corporate speak for get the F out. But getting rid of a leader with the leadership of rotting fruit in August after someone has been on vacation for a week is not going to fix the issue. The obvious question is, why can we not get answers? But the truth is, the answer is already known. It doesn't take 9 days to know the basics of how something happened. They knew the actual outlines within a day or 48 hours at the latest. Especially today with so much digital footprint, the biggest issue at this point is not having the answers. It's that there's so much information and every level in the red tape is adding their own spin. I have been witness to some very interesting issues that have happened in corporate America. I worked in banking and worked for a few of the biggest financial institutions in the world and supported many top executives as a business strategist. So yeah, I was in the room where it happened. And again, cue Hamilton. So yes, I sat in a lot of boring meetings, and I want to give you an example that fits in with what we're seeing today. A few years ago, I was sitting in a meeting, and an issue came up where they were talking about a community that was complaining to the media that their local ATM ran out of money more often than affluent suburbs. It went from just local press to the national media, which of course then it became a crisis. And so they had about 15 minutes in the meeting that they wanted to talk about this. And so they were discussing and talking about how they were going to meet back in a week or so, but they were going to have a task force or something else that's stupid. It wasn't going to get anything done. But I digress. For some reason, I didn't think that it made a lot of sense that, the ATM machine just didn't like poor people. So I decided to do a little dumpster diving for myself. And I was looking into the issue, and I went through the hierarchy, and I found a guy in there that I'd actually worked with probably like 4 or 5 years before, and he was running the ATM logistics team. So I thought, it might be interesting to talk to him. So I picked up the phone and I talked to him, and within 5 minutes I found out what the issue was. And I was correct. ATMs just don't hate poor people. That wasn't the problem. The problem was deeper and more interesting and also really boring. So the issue is this. Those trucks that you see that fill up the money for the ATMs, well, there are specific guidelines for where they can be housed. Basically for security, and there's like a whole bunch of like latency, and it has to be in a certain area, and it has to have certain fencing and security. So the problem is that if you're in the suburbs, it's totally easy to have a place for that. There's plenty of secure placings. But when you're in a city, it's really hard for them to get the real estate as well as the security and the amount of space that they need. So what happens is in the larger cities, they keep those trucks farther out. So, and I'm making this up because I don't know what it was, but let's say the ATM, normally they go and refill it when 80% of the money is gone. Well, 80% of the money gone from Pleasantville, USA, the truck might be 15 minutes away. Whereas in, big city USA, that truck probably has to go maybe 2-3 hours. So the difference is, it's not that they were trying to keep the money out and they wanted it to run out of money. The problem is that they had a certain time frame and they used it as a one-size-fits-all. So that's why some of the bigger cities, especially in the lower income areas where there's dense population, the ATMs would go out of money. It really wasn't an issue that was that big of a deal. The problem is that even though the people at the bottom have been trying to get this logistic change up the chain, it wasn't sexy enough. It wasn't sexy enough until the press made it sexy. And then all of a sudden, like the normal C-suiters, when they have to miss their Wednesday wine lunch and they actually have to do anything, they start running around screaming. So I literally asked my friend to give me his paperwork that he and his friends had done for a recommendation, and I handed it to my boss. And of course, my boss at the next meeting took that in, and everybody acted like he was the second coming of Messiah. Oh my gosh, he solved this. Well, he did solve it, and no, I didn't get any credit, nor did my friend. But you know what they did is what they should have done probably 2 years before. They adjusted the alerts to be adjusted by the amount of time it took to fill. And guess what? The ATM stopped running out of money. And of course, our beloved CEO went out and did a big press release of how they were fixing this and they cared. When the honest truth is that this idea had been bandied about for months, probably years, and nobody ever heard it because, again, it didn't get up to the top. So while I'm sure you are really excited about my extraordinary, amazing story about ATMs, this is a bigger issue. Each level of a company or a government takes information and keeps what they think is important, and then they add their spin. And by the time you get done, an issue goes from some simple logistics of hey, we should probably adjust our timing for the ATM so we make sure they don't run out, to we hate urban people. So I can guarantee you that the folks on the ground already know what is happening, and they also know what the failures are. What is going to take weeks is for everyone to add their opinion, take out what they don't like, and by the time we see this report that's supposed to be coming out in 60 days, it will hardly resemble the truth. You also see the frustration in Congress. While I was listening, I was astounded at the complete enragement on both sides. It was hilarious to me when AOC sounded like some gun-loving neocon. It's a real screw-up. I mean, I was listening to her, and she could have been, I don't know, Billy Bob whatever from Alabama, the way she was talking. So that's when it's a really bad screw-up, when everybody is on your throat. And Director Cheadle probably did the worst job in the history of the world of trying to keep her job. It was just ridiculous, and the frustration and anger I saw from the Congress people was actually kind of cool, in a bad way, but in a good way too. But also, the only word that she used all the time was unfortunately, and what unfortunately really means is I'm not going to tell you anything and you can't make me. Well, guess what? Now you're out of job. I'm also going to give credit to our members of Congress, which I rarely do. The members of the Homeland Security Committee went to Butler to look themselves. That was the smartest thing that they did. They went there. They even got up on the roof. Even one of the members who's 70 years old, he was walking around on the roof. I was pretty impressed with that. And they also told us Cheadle never went there. She never stepped foot in Pennsylvania. That is potentially some of the worst leadership I've ever seen, and I've seen some really bad leaders. So if I were her, I wouldn't be impressed. While they were in Butler, they spoke to local law enforcement and just local volunteers, and it was so eye-opening and exactly what they needed to do, because they got to the raw data and they got some really great intel to take back to ask the good questions. So I'm going to give them a little bit of applause here, and also say that it just shows what a poor job the Secret Service did, which right now all they're doing is just throwing themselves on the ground and saying, look at the FBI, talk to the FBI, we're not in charge. But what was really interesting is some of the things that they found. They said that the day before the event, people were allowed to go in and do the decorating without any vetting. They were just allowed to walk in. And one of the people that was doing the decorations said that her husband walked through a gate that had just been zip tied together. There was absolutely no security whatsoever at this place the day before, which to me, and I'm not in the Secret Service or the FBI or the police, tells me that's really bad police work. And this gave us some really good information that they used when they spoke with Colonel Christopher Paris of the Pennsylvania State Police Department. Because unlike Director Cheadle, he actually answered questions. I actually really liked him, and I think he did a really good job. But anyway, the one thing that was brought up that I thought was just mind-blowing was that because the building was outside the perimeter, in Pennsylvania, they have a law that allows open carry. So it would have been perfectly legal for anyone to walk around with a gun. And because of where the perimeter was, legally, the gunman, and by the way, I never use his name because he doesn't need to get anything as a martyr or anything. He's a piece of shit, so don't care. But anyway, he could have actually just walked around legally with a gun, which is why the perimeter, and again, here I am quoting AOC on this, the perimeter of any engagement should always be as large as any gun that could shoot. I mean, again, like I said, AOC sounding like a neocon tells you how bad this is. Colonel Paris also told us that he was never given the operations plan from the Secret Service, so they only knew their pieces of it. And so they didn't know the full plan, and Secret Service never shared that with him, which again, is part of the issue, because they didn't know and they assumed, and on another podcast we'll do a thing about assumptions because we know how that works. So you can't really blame them, but he was also really forthcoming, and they asked him another question, which was, if you were been the person putting this together, what would you have, how would you have fixed it? And he said, well, we would have done something with the water tank that was above as well as these. But again, it was outside of his purview and he didn't get to see the full plan. So I think that's a real big piece of information that's going to need to be fixed going forward. The other piece of information that was really interesting, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, his name was Patrick Yose. They asked him a question, and I thought it was a really good thing to kind of just think about. He said, if he could sum up the world today, he would say that we talk at each other and not to each other, and that really needs to stop. And I think he's really right, and I'm going to give, again, a huge round of applause to this committee, because they were talking to each other and not at each other. In fact, if they ran out of time, they go back and forth. They go Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. The next member would go, hey, that was a great question. I know it got cut off. I'm going to ask it. And I thought it was really great. And it was like, wow, we actually can be bipartisan. I just thought it was a breath of fresh air. Normally I'm so snarky, but I thought it was a breath of fresh air. And the one thing that they also said is, we're here to help you. So law enforcement, if you need help, we need you to tell us what you need. Nobody is trying to tell the Secret Service they can't have anything. And so I'm hopeful with Cheadle gone that we may actually get some better movement. And in some late breaking news, because I'm taping in the morning, I've been listening to the FBI director talk, and he mentioned that the shooter had gotten off 8 shots. I actually thought he'd only gotten off 3 shots, but it looks like he got 8. So I had heard 9. So it sounds like there were 8 shots from him and 1 from the sniper that got him. So we're really lucky that there was not more people hurt, to be honest, when you think about he got 8 shots off. And based off what Colonel Paris said, he also indicated that the 2 deputies that had jumped up onto the roof, or one that's like pushing the other one up, probably sped everything up a bit, and that also could have been part of it. They also indicated that there were actually 3 people that were on site that they were calling threats, and about 10 minutes before the shooting, the shooter ended up being moved up in precedent from a threat level higher, whatever they call it. I don't know. I don't remember. But it was just really interesting that they had him in their sights for a long time, and they had known about 10 minutes before. They asked Colonel Paris what he would have done. Would he have let Trump go on stage? And he said no. Again, I was really impressed by how these guys actually answered questions. But then again, they knew they weren't going to get in trouble. But they also said something that I thought was really interesting, is that they have already had to supplement the Secret Service 20 events this year. And because it's a presidential election, there'll probably be more. So this is going to be going on all over the country. So we all need to really be paying attention to this. As I said, it was refreshing to see that they said everything we needed to hear. We have to figure out not just what went wrong, but how to fix it, how they can support local law enforcement, how they can partner to make sure this doesn't happen again. And then you look back at the director of Secret Service, the former director of Secret Service, who wanted to just praise the workers on the ground and forget the levels of bureaucracy, who will never take responsibility, and hope that by mid-September they can drop 100,000 pages of a document that only 2% will be important. And in the meantime, they will have a parade of figureheads go to Congress and tell us nothing in the end, and there wouldn't be a systemic change in the Secret Service. The obvious answer is there's only systemic change when people care. And what we need to do as American citizens is to take our party hats off and keep the country hat on. We have to continue to push for accountability and also praise Congress when they're doing things right. Like right now, they actually are doing things correctly. I cannot believe I'm actually saying that. If we want to see Congress push for Secret Service accountability and systemic change, we have to ensure that they know we have not moved on to the next shiny object / subject. Again, this is not a Democrat or Republican or independent or libertarian issue. This is an issue that affects all of us and our security. So the obvious answer is that the only way that we're going to fix things is if we care. And so it's time to step up and for us to show them that we care too. Nobody should ever lose their life or get injured by going to a political rally. We need to stop talking at each other and talk to each other. And that's my answer.